Welcome to Next to Madison, a podcast to help you live your best life.
Welcome back to another fun and exciting episode of Next to Madison. I am your host, Madison Malloy. I am so excited for today's episode. Of course, I'm excited for every episode, but there's certain episodes that I get really, really excited because I feel that they're going to change your life. Every episode is designed to make you happier, healthier, and wealthier. And there are nuggets and amazing wisdom you take from each episode. But this one I'm particularly very, very excited about. I don't even know the words properly, but I get a piece of paper and notepad to make sure you're jotting some stuff down, because we're talking about subjective control. Some of you may know what this is. Some of you may say, what the heck is that? So you're going to want to listen. Subjective control really is being able to fully be in control of your mind. When you're fully in control of your mind, you actually really become the creator and the director of your life. Okay. This is where the magic happens. This is where you're stepping into elite status. You're reaching your goals, all of this great stuff. So I have an expert that's coming on in this subject matter, who has worked with Bob Proctor directly, has taught with him, has been mentored by him, and he is talking about this subject of subjective control, how to take control of your life and your mind. We are also talking about the power of letting go, and also doing that thing where you can stop caring what people think. Right? There's healthy caring and then there's unhealthy caring. How to be more aware of your thoughts. And again, the paradigm that Bob Proctor so talks about, which is the collection of thoughts that are stored in your subconscious mind. This is an excellent, excellent episode. He gives you an exercise to do at the end. So make sure you're writing stuff down, or just go ahead and replay it. Just a reminder to please rate, review, subscribe, share it with your friend. I would be so, so grateful for that. It helps us continue creating amazing content for you on Next to Madison here. Again, my goal is to make you happier, healthier, and wealthier. So if you have any ideas or feedback, please let me know. We would love to hear from you. And again, I appreciate all of you enormously for continuing to listen to the show and sharing and supporting it. So thank you. And I hope you enjoy this amazing episode. We will be right back after this brief message.
Hey, it's Madison Malloy. I just wanted to remind you to make sure you grab a copy of my book, Time to Lighten the Fuck Up. It is a great, funny self-help book that is going to help you get out of your own way. I have already helped thousands and thousands of people, and they are on their way to living their dream life, and I want every listener to be able to live their dream life as well. So grab a copy of the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or even the audiobook on Audible. Now back to the show.
We are back with our amazing guest. I'm so excited for this episode. It is going to be inspiring, motivational, life-changing. I encourage you, if you're not driving, to grab a piece of paper and take some notes. You can always replay the episode as well. But with us today, we have got the amazing success coach and SVP of sales at Proctor Gallagher. He is also a world-renowned entrepreneur. I'd like to welcome DP Gates. How are you?
Hey, Madison, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm so good. I am absolutely so excited that you're here, because you are somebody that has worked with one of my idols that I never got to meet, which is Bob Proctor, who I first got introduced to him when I was given the book, The Secret, from my parents years ago. And it was not life-changing then, because I didn't absorb the information as much as I needed to, but I kept reading it and kept reading it. And then I got more involved with Proctor Gallagher and just Bob's teachings and other books he had written, and it really changed my life. So to be able to have a conversation with somebody and bring you to my platform, because you've worked with him directly. So I want to, before we jump into your stories with Bob, I want to just have you give us a quick backstory so people know exactly who you are.
Yeah, sure. So, I've been around Bob forever. So my story really is tied around him in many ways. I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. Always knew it. The only year in school I even enjoyed was my 8th grade year at Mojave Middle School, where they actually scrapped the grades. We didn't have grades. They put bean bags in classes so we'd be more comfortable in learning. They allowed us to start our own businesses and compete with other people who started their own businesses. And I was teaching every morning. I was doing the morning announcements on a thing called Channel 1, which is probably aging me a little bit, for the entire school. So I kind of got like a hunger to speak in front of people and give value start my own businesses, compete with other people. Like I thought that was all really fun. And I was just hooked on it. And I went through high school. My parents were really into personal development. So I think I was fortunate there. And my friends were reading reading biology books. I was reading Think and Grow Rich and Rich Dad Poor Dad, like all those ones everybody knows about. And I was like you just said, I wasn't absorbing it. I didn't know what the heck I was reading, but I was reading it. And I think that was guiding me into a different direction. And at 19, my mom introduced me to Bob at a seminar, a Science of Getting Rich seminar, which is the book that inspired The Secret. And he said something I never forgot. He said, having a job is the worst way to make money because you trade your time for money and you run out of time. And I think that's partly true. And I made a decision that day I'd never have a job, and I never have. I've always worked for myself, 1099, self-employed, my own business. And I certainly have had lean years where I probably should have got a job for sure. That didn't work out so well for me for some years. But I let about 6 years go by, and I have 3 sons now. I'm a full-time single dad, but my first was on the way. And I had this chance meeting, if you call it that, with Bob at an airport. And that was the day he changed my life because he moved me into action. Like he sold me on an idea. And instead of me just reading the books and watching the videos and enjoying it, being entertained, but my results weren't changing, he got me to move. And that year changed my life. I got into his mentorship, which you're familiar with now. And I started teaching on stage with him about a year later, The Science of Getting Rich. We were traveling North America, and he took an affinity towards me, which was great. And we became great friends for it was like a 2-3 year period there in my late 20s. And then I went on to do some other entrepreneurial ventures and become a top producer in direct sales. And about 5 years ago, I went through some like personal challenges in my home life, and something just drew me back here. I had friends that were working here that were doing very well. And I was just always attracted to Bob because he was like the most aware person I've ever met. And so I chose to come back here, and they had built such a great culture in their coaching and their sales division. And it was very impressive what they had built while I was gone. And that was 5 years ago. And now here we are, and I'm running his entire sales division and having the time of my life. I have a lot of fulfillment, a lot of significance. Those are 2 things I'm really focused on more than the money. I mean, I'm still money driven. Money's important right there with oxygen, but it's more about the fulfillment, the significance in myself and the people we coach. And I love it. It's fantastic.
That's amazing. So because you had such great access to Bob, what were some of the best lessons that he taught you?
Oh my gosh. That is an open-ended question. We could go like 3 hours. The best thing he did for me at that age, I think I spent my early to mid 20s. It was all about me. That's probably how it is for most people. And I was buying things to impress people that didn't care about me. And I was trying to look cool. And I was a taker. Like I was a taker, and I was just wanting to look the part and not do the work. And he helped me become a man of value. That's what he helped. And he helped me focus on giving. He changed how I looked at like sales. He was one of the best salespeople I've ever been around. Because he helped people. That's all he focused on. And all he wanted to do was enrich other people's lives. And he knew if he did that, he would enrich his own life. And once I took the focus off myself and lived the way he lived, my whole, like my income, everything, like how I felt about myself and perceived myself, how people perceived me, it all changed overnight very, very quickly. So I think towards the top of the list was him changing how I viewed myself and how I viewed helping people. Like I was a taker, and I changed and became a giver. And the more I gave, the more I got. And I loved that. And he was the most generous person I've ever met in my life. He would give you anything. And when he spent time with you, you felt it. It was just you and him. He was in the present moment, and you felt that connection, and you felt that he cared about you. And I hope I have done him right by doing the same thing, for years, for the last 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's such a good thing you bring up, because I think most people in their 20s, they're seeking outside validation because we're still trying to discover who we are, and we don't have a lot of these lessons, and we're taking a lot of these challenges and these, as Bob said, older paradigms, and into our experiences. And so we are buying things we can't afford to impress people that don't really give a crap about us. Yeah. So when that shifted, what kind of changed for you? Obviously you started making more money, but now you were valuing the money differently. So it wasn't about impressing people. It was probably more about what you could do to impact the world, correct?
Yeah, for sure. All my friends call me the millionaire next door because you wouldn't know. I like to do nice things, but my focus was getting my needs met so I could do what I really wanted. And that may be flying on a jet somewhere or staying somewhere nice every once in a while. But I think outside looking in, people wouldn't necessarily know that because I don't care. Like he helped me not care about the opinions of other people. And that when you don't care about what other people think about you, you are free. And you said something about validation. I always joke about people like on social media, you know who they are. They're the validation seekers, which is most people. And then there's the value givers. And the value givers own the game. Like people, the validation seekers don't know that. They think that they just need to put out stuff so they get likes and comments and whatever. But the people who are pumping out value, they're such givers, and it all comes back to them. And for me, that was the biggest thing that changed is my needs began to get met. And I shut the door to any lack and limitation, because lack and limitations, you're going to need a lot of validation when you're coming from lack and limitation. And when I shut the door to that, all I was thinking about is what I wanted. That was it. So I was coming from a place of prosperity and a place of abundance and a place of opulence. And as you inundate your mind with that, and you don't let the outside world control you, and you let your inner world, move you, you draw all these circumstances and these people and these things that they were already there prior. You just weren't in harmonious vibration with them.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's so well said. And, I think everyone needs to really kind of take a lesson in that of being the millionaire next door, because it's nice to have great things and nice things and flashy things. And if you can afford it, you should absolutely do it. But also know you put yourself a little bit at risk, and you sleep better with more money in your investment accounts for sure.
So.
And then it's the ultimate freedom, right? That's what everybody's chasing at the end of the day, is the freedom to do what they want when they want. But you need to have money to survive, which is key. So this is a big fear that I think holds the majority of people back from really stepping into what they truly want to do. And you mentioned it was the caring what people think. How were you able to shut that off and really stop caring?
I don't know if you ever shut it off. I think there's probably some part of like your old conditioning that still wants people's approval,
Right.
I don't need the approval of anybody, but it's nice to be respected, and you can't be respected if you don't respect yourself first. Like it comes with so you have to have self-respect, but how do you have self-respect? Well, how do you create confidence? You have to have the courage to do it. And I think I would never use the word lucky, but I think I was fortunate enough to meet Bob at a young age. And what he did for me was the greatest gift. It felt awful because I wanted to throw up all the time, but he was putting me in such uncomfortable positions. It forced me to bring out gifts that were within me that I wasn't even aware of. And as we traveled around with each other, and I was teaching with him, like that is a crazy thing to do at 26, 27 with a giant like Bob. And I look back and I was so grateful, but at the time I was so terrified. And all I was thinking about was, what was the audience thinking of me? What are they going to think of me? What if I screw up? And he just mentored me and guided me through those processes. And I was able to lean in and do them too. I felt like he was holding me accountable in such a positive light that I wanted these goals for myself, but I think I equally wanted them for him. Like I didn't want to let him down because somebody like that took a liking to me. And the more and more I did that, the more and more I expressed these gifts, and I didn't suppress them, because I don't know a leader or a great speaker or anybody that suppresses. Like you tell me if you could, I don't know anybody like that. They're all expressive.
Yeah.
So he helped me express. And the more I expressed, and the more he would teach me that it's not about me and it's about them. And he said, when you get on a call, or when you get into speaking into an audience and you're nervous, he said, that's a problem because you're focused on yourself. And he said, I need you to get the focus off your damn self and put it on the audience, And the more and more we did that, the more and more I grew. I took that courage and it developed into confidence. And that confidence developed into what you just talked about, freedom, but a mental freedom. And I don't know if it ever goes away, that you might want validation here and there, I guess. But I think it's a beautiful world to live in when you are mentally free. And when you're mentally free, you just draw everything to you, all the right people to you, everything. And he helped me with that. But I think it's important to be around the right people and be in the right environments where they're helping you draw out your gifts. That's what mentorship is, right? And you're not necessarily, maybe you're afraid of failure. You shouldn't be afraid of it. Failure is a good thing. I teach my kids that all the time, but you're leaning in and you're failing forward constantly. So you're growing constantly, and you have to be growing because you're either growing or you're dying. There's no in between there. So to get around a guy like that in an environment like that, where I could express my gifts that I wasn't even aware of, and the higher I climbed, the more people didn't like me. Like he would say, you need more haters. Like, you're not doing enough. He goes, I've got all kinds of people out there that make fun of me and say this and say that. And he's like, I love it. He goes, I don't pay attention to it, but I love it because I know I'm doing something right. So anytime I have a hater or somebody comments on something, I'm like, I always think of Bob. I'm like, I must be doing something right. It's good.
That's so funny. I didn't know anyone that he had haters. Who knew?
Yeah, the haters are in the cheap seat, so you can't really hear them that much. They're not in the game anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's so crazy. I didn't even know that. So you enlightened that, but it's true. As they say, what's that old saying? It's lonely at the top.
It is, absolutely.
You don't need a big group because you want to make sure you're around people, like-minded people that are going to inspire you to be who you want to become. Right?
Yeah,
Your network is your net worth.
I think I love that Jim Rohn quote. I think it's so easy this day and age, or any day and age, to either cheer on or boo people from the crowd. But it's not easy to go say, I'm going to be elite. Like, I'm going to be the best in the world at what I do. And when you make the decision to do that, you just got to understand that there's going to be more people that love you than hate you. But that's where the validation part comes in. You got to just kick that to the curb and just have a good relationship with the haters. Because when you're doing that, you're doing something right, for sure.
Yeah, I like that. And that's worth repeating. So if you guys have people that are negative or hating on you, just remember you're probably in the right direction. So that's a good motivator. So you and I have talked offline about a what I thought was such an enlightening subject that you are very well aware of and well versed in, subjective control. And I don't think a lot of people either know what this is, and if they don't, and if they do, they don't know how to use it to their advantage. So I really want to dive into this subject of subjective control. So explain what it is for people who don't know, and then we'll go into how you can use it to improve your life and your finances.
Sure. So subjective control is learning how to take control of your life, period. It's having dominion over your mind, having dominion over what's going into your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. And I think a lot of people say, yeah, I get that, I get that, but they don't. They really don't. And you have to remember that we deliberately practice what we deliberately practice, we become, right? And we're talking a lot about becoming elite lately, and you cannot become elite if you're deliberately practicing an old version of you. You have to deliberately practice a new version of you. So everything comes from the new version, and that having subjective control over your inner world it's essential to doing that. Okay. And you have access to that elite version inside of you. That's like the razor's edge. It's not outside of you, it's inside of you. And I think most people blame other people. They blame their results, they blame circumstances, but your results are an expression of what's going on within. And I think most people, they do not expect, or they expect what they don't want. Right. And this, you talk to people probably every day, like I do, and it's unconscious. And I do agree that we do become what we think about, to a certain extent, like a cliche line these days. But you become what you think about, and you internalize. You have to internalize it. You can't just think about it. But most people aren't focused on the most important part, which is, what am I thinking about all day? Like, do they deliberately think about what they're thinking about all day long? They don't. All right. And you have to ask yourself, if you're not doing that, then that means you're accepting any ideas that are coming into your mind. And whatever you don't reject, you're accepting. So you have to have control and dominion over your mind. That's subjective control. So I always tell people, ask yourself, how many thoughts throughout the day are you unconsciously accepting? Like, how many? Because you don't have subjective control. And we continuously choose what we think about, right? So you control the movements of your attention, and you can modify your life as you desire. People may not believe that, but you can accept that idea right now that that's true. It is true. And I think that's why focus is so important. We talk about focus. In my opinion, that's like the number one thing, talking about elite performance, is lately, the last couple of months, the word that pops up is focus. And people who want to become elite have to begin to have an immense capacity for sustained concentration, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what elite professionals do. They block out anyone or anything that threatens their focus. And if you understand that ideas are spiritual seeds, right? Then your focus is like the energy that will shorten the gestation period. And Bob used to always say concentration increases amplitude of vibration. And with your free will, that means you have the freedom, like we were talking about, to select and assume any idea that's fact. And that's really what subjective control is having control over what you're thinking and having control of what's going into your mind, because your mind's a battlefield. There's so much things being thrown at you, whether it's, your spouse, your kids, what's on TV. You have to be mindful of that and reject that. And every time you hear something you don't want or think about something you don't want, you say reject or cancel, and you replace it with the opposite, whatever it is that you want. And the more it seems silly at first, but the more you do that, you're telling your subconscious maybe a lie at the beginning, but the subconscious accepts anything you give it. So eventually that lie will become fact, and you'll begin to manifest whatever you want into form.
That's amazing. So do you actually say out loud or say to yourself, I reject or cancel?
No, I used to at the beginning. I'd be like, no, cancel, no. Like I wanted to be firm with my subconscious because it responds to emotion, right? Whether the emotion's good or bad, and you want it to be good and be positive. So at the beginning, I started to do that until it became a habit, and I do it all the time when I'm around people that, let's say it's family or friends, that they don't understand this stuff.
Yeah.
You got to, Bob used to always say, don't go as often, don't stay as long with those people, but you still have to spend time with them. So I'm constantly in my mind just being like, reject, 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 with family or friends if I need to.
No, I think that's life-changing. And yeah, I think that a lot of people that are listening to this are going to say like, oh, wow, I didn't think to do that. But it's kind of like you are reinforcing the fact that that's not true and that's not what you want. And then I've never done that. So like you just gave me a piece of advice I'm going to add into my repertoire, because there is outside noise, and you can't always control the negative influences. I don't really watch the news. I study or I'll look at the business stuff and the markets and things like that. But I turn off the other crap because it's just negative. And I know they're just promoting a fear agenda to get people to tune in. I just tune that out. But I like the reject thing, because you do hear a lot of negativity out there.
It's true. Yeah, I don't watch the news either. But I always tell people, if you're the master of your fate and you're the captain of your soul, that saying, then you have full control over what you focus on. Like you have full control over it. And Bob used to always say people are a cork in the ocean, like they go wherever the wave takes it. And in Science of Getting Rich, Science of Getting Rich, Waddles talks about how some people do certain things and others do things in a certain way. And it's like that fine razor's edge, of what makes good and great. Good and great is, it's pretty close, but there's those people who are able to take subjective control over their mind and make up their mind on what they want to do and where they're going, and get on with the work. The rest get caught up in the distractions, the TV, the nonsense. And I know that's easier said than done, because I was the guy, and I'm sure you've done it at some point in your life till you get into this environment where you're like, there's no excuse, like, let's just go do it. But, I would say you don't know my story, and there are exceptions to the rule. There are traumas, there are things that are very real, and I'm very empathetic to that. So I'm not saying, not for everybody, but for most people, everybody has a story. And if you get tied to that story, you're never going to create great success in your life. You're going to be tied to that story, and you're going to be a victim to that story. And the second you take responsibility for that story, that's when you're taking subjective control, because you say no more, and unfortunately it takes something like a divorce or a death or some kind of negative impact that gets you moving. But if you can get to a point where you have subjective control over everything you're doing in your life, that doesn't mean you're not having fun and enjoying your life. My God, I have fun all the time. I love having fun. But fun's fleeting, like you still have to have subjective control when the fun's done, and, get on with your life. So I think when you master subjective control, you master everything.
Yeah, no, I did 100%. So let's talk about the importance of subjective control with something that so many people are suffering from these days, which is mental health. Depression and anxiety is through the roof. People are popping pills left and right. I feel like after what you've been talking about subjective control, that some of this stuff could be almost, a lot of it could end up is probably self-induced a little bit, because they don't have subjective control. So they let their mind continue to go down a path, because we've all had that experience where we're worried about something, and then we keep thinking about it, and then we start worrying about something else, and then it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a second. And that's when real anxiety, because anxiety hasn't happened, it's the fear of the unknown, really kicks off. So talk about how it kind of ties into mental health in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think mental health is a real thing. Like, again, I'm not gonna, say it's not, because it is. Like, we've all
Of
gone through our
course.
stuff.
Yeah.
We all have. I have gone through my stuff. I'm sure you have. We could talk for hours about the stuff we've gone through. But if you understand like what we teach, like we're always talking about, and Bob talks about, paradigms. And a paradigm is nothing but a multitude of habits that are locked away in our subconscious, and they have exclusive control of our behaviors, our habits, our relationship with money, our relationship with the opposite sex, all of that, and that a lot of that stuff is learned at an early age. Our image, our image is part of that paradigm too, how we perceive ourselves. And that can take us down a dark road if we don't perceive ourselves, if we don't look at ourselves in a healthy way. Or if we're tied to that story, like I just said, when you're tied to a story like that and you don't feel very good about yourself, you're gonna suppress, and I've been there. Like, I get it. Like, we used to have somebody that worked with us, that super successful guy, and he would always get on me about suppressing years ago. And he's like, I need you to express more, like express your talent. And the second I started doing more of that, like I like health stuff would go away, because when you suppress, like, you get that anxiety. Anxiety can turn into depression and all disease, which is a body not at ease. And I think the people who are expressing themselves and moving through these things and not being tied to stories and tied to those traumas, those things can make or break you, But if this goes back to what we were just talking about. If you can get yourself into an environment, whether you have to pay to do it or you can find one without paying to do it, and get around people that really understand what you and I teach, like, it will change your life. Like, you'll be tied to a story that serves you. You'll be tied to an image and an identity that serves you. You'll be working with a bigger version of who you are. But I think the paradigm, which is old conditioning, it will always bring you back. So the second you start saying, this is who I'm going to be, I'm not going to be tied to the story, the old conditioning says, no, that's not who you are. Like, you're not good enough. You're not worthy enough. You're imposter syndrome. Here it comes. You're not going to ever be that good. And if you're on your own doing it, that's going to be tough. I'm not saying you can't. I'm sure there's people who've done it on their own. I don't know anybody who's created anything of great significance by themselves. I certainly have not. I've always had people around me, amazing people. But I think when you begin to learn how to override that paradigm and that old conditioning, it's going to put up a battle at the beginning, because it does not want you to change. It wants you to stay at the same. It wants you to be comfortable. It probably wants you to be miserable. But when you realize that resistance is a good thing, resistance means you're on the right track. It's good feedback that you're starting to override the old conditioning. And when you get around people like that, when I came back here 5 years ago, I was going through some personal stuff, and at the time I felt like my world was ending, and it was awful. And it was awful. I look back now and I laugh at it. I can't believe how miserable I was for this period of time. But it would have dragged out so much longer, Madison, if I wasn't in this environment around people who, they were certainly sympathetic, like what I was going through, for sure. But they knew that I didn't need sympathy. They knew I needed direction. They knew I needed, support. And to have that direction and that support, and somebody like Bob who said, look, you gotta do the work. Like, go fall in love with the work and fall in love with helping other people. And as I did that, it just sped up the process of like grieving what I was going through and hurting what I was going through. And it made me such a better person. It made me so much more understanding of others who had gone through what I was going through. And I think when you get around the right people, I'm making a long story longer here, that's a game changer in you not being tied to the old stories or the old traumas, and you being tied to this new version of who you want to become, because everybody should want to create a new version of themselves. I don't care if you have the best relationship with yourself ever. You should always be upping your image. You always want to up your self-image. You always want to up your standard, your discipline. Like, you never want to stay the same. So I think getting around the right people in the right environment, that speeds up the process of getting through the traumas and getting through the hurt, because it's real. And pushing through anxiety. My dad used to always say it's rarely anxiety. He goes, usually it's excitement. I used to tell him I'm scared and I have anxiety before basketball games or football games. And he's like, you'll miss this feeling. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, it's not anxiety. He's like, you're excited to get out there and go perform, and once you get out there, it's on, it is on, and you're going to go, kick butt. He goes, but you'll miss this feeling one day when you don't have it. And I think anxiety is real. People have that, but I just have a great relationship with it now. When I start to feel that, I go, oh, this could be me moving in the right direction and growing, and growth is a good thing.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine who's very successful, but we were having a conversation about, how he was saying how so many people that work for him or friends of his that blame that are replaying this old story, as you said, like change the story, that blame their parents for everything wrong in their life. And it's like, I'm going to send this to him when it airs and be like, send this to all those people that you were referring to. Because it's true. You got to change the story. Stop living that old story. And that's part of the subjective control, is really like, upgrading your mind and controlling it.
Yeah. It's understanding your mind. Like we teach that stick man character, where you understand what the conscious mind is. And you and I talked about it at the beginning. You talked about how you were absorbing the knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. And I did that for 6 years. So I was studying the books, watching the videos. And what I didn't understand was it was all going into my conscious mind, but that's the gatekeeper to the subconscious. And I needed to figure out how to get this into my subconscious. Otherwise, the results wouldn't change. And if you understand what the conscious mind is and the subconscious mind is, and your body, which is an instrument of the mind, and you have to really understand it. And we can't teach that here today, but when you begin to understand it on a PhD level, then you will understand that you will never be tied to an old story ever again. You will never be thinking about who you don't want to be or what you don't want. You will never put anything negative into your mind ever again, because you'll understand how powerful your mind is.
No, I love that. It's kind of like, get rid of that old story. So let's talk about the impact of subjective control on your income.
Oh gosh.
We're talking about mental health, but income's a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
Your state creates your income.
Yeah, whatever's going on the inside is a direct reflection of what's going on outside. Your business is a direct reflection of what's going on the inside. You may not agree with me, but we can agree to disagree.
I agree.
Yeah, not you, but anybody that's listening. Right. You understand for sure, because whatever ideas we focus on, they expand, okay? The subconscious, it goes to our dominating thinking, and the results are a reflection of what's dominating your mind. So we keep using elite as an example because that's what we're talking about. So if you want to become elite, you have to be thinking elite all the time, no matter what. And for me and for you, like, we don't allow old conditioning to make our decisions, only the new conditioning. And that is very uncomfortable at first, absolutely uncomfortable. And I get that. But you have to allow yourself to get emotionally involved. And as you get emotionally involved with it, that's going to become the new you, and you'll lead with that new conditioning, and you will control the frequency and the vibration that you're on and who you attract. But you have to master subjective control. And, Sandy's going to be teaching this at our next event, which I'm excited about. But you can't do that by paying attention to the evidence of your senses, like what you see and what you hear. Those are here to, help you see beautiful things, help you taste beautiful things, help you hear beautiful things. But they're also here to protect you, and they can hinder you when you're seeing through your eyes. You want to start using what we talk about in our environment, your higher faculties. That's, memory, intuition, your will, perception, reason, imagination. In my opinion, imagination might be the most important one, because that's where everything starts. Like, we're envisioning what we want or what we don't want, right? And I think most people, when they're kids, I have 3 kids, 2 young ones, and they're constantly using their imagination. Like, they do it unconsciously. They love it. They're constantly building images of what they want and what they see they want. And I think as we get older, we unconsciously use our imagination against us, because we're always focused on what we don't want. And woe is me. And I just think people who become great at something, they build a magnificent vision, and you can't build a magnificent vision without subjective control. And your mind is going to accept the idea, whatever idea you give it. So you have to get in touch with spirit. Like, spirit's flowing to and through us at all times, whether people believe that or not. And as it flows to and through us, we have the ability to create the negative or the positive. And if we want to get amazing results, we have to understand our relationship with that power. And that power, if it is flowing to and through us, then we have to understand what we're working with. And I always say we're an intelligent being, but we're working with an intelligent being. And we just have to unite those two together so they can cooperate and co-create. And I think when you control your attention in the subjective world, you can alter your life as you want. When you control your attention in the subjective world, you can do whatever you want. You will attract whatever you want. And I think as I began to understand that when I was younger, I was making probably like $20,000 a year when I met Bob and had a kid on the way. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment. I gave my kid the 1 bedroom, and I was sleeping on the couch. And as I began to understand this concept of taking control of my mind, no matter what the results and the circumstances were outside of me, then I began to live the life of my dreams. And everything started to unfold in a beautiful way. And it's one of the most important lessons we can learn. And I don't think a lot of people talk about subjective control, and we don't have enough time to go into the finite details of really how to learn it and ingrain it into your subconscious. That's what we teach with our mentorship and stuff. But when you begin to understand that, your whole world will change.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll start having better relationships. You'll be making more money. It's a hard thing to hear sometimes when people are struggling and they have, financial problems, which the majority of people do, that it's really their mind that is producing the results that they're getting. So that's a very positive thing. So I want you to, is there like a brief exercise you can give us that people that are listening can do to start kind of, mastering more subjective control in their own lives? Like, do you have writing things down, whatever it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am not I think I operate from the left and right brain pretty equally, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm overthinking it and not overthinking it right now. So I guess I do. But I don't like intellectual exercises where you have to write it out. I'll do it because Bob used to tell me all the time to do it, because writing causes thinking. So absolutely, it's a great exercise. I would start, here's what I would do. Most people don't know what they want. They know what they don't want. They got a grocery list of what they don't want. Mm-hmm. Like sit down and figure out like one thing, not a bunch of things, whether maybe it's one behavior you want to change. Like, don't try to change 15 behaviors at once. You'll change none. Don't chase all those rabbits. Just pick one. Or maybe it's just something you really want. It's a house, it's a car, it's a relationship. Pick one thing and write out exactly what that looks like. Like, write out a vision of where you'll be a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, and write it out in present tense. Start there, okay? And then what I want you to do is set a reminder on your phone for every 2 hours to envision, to imagine this goal, whatever that goal is for you. And if you have a hard time, using your imagination, which I had at the beginning, then put together like a vision board. I know it's like a cheesy thing these days or whatever, but it's like something on your computer, something like, I have things all over my office to just remind me, because I don't need to close my eyes. I can just look at them. I can just use that focus and that concentration to look at it and really envision it and feel it. So that's what I would do. I would write out whatever that is that you truly want in present tense, like it's already happened, and use emotional wording throughout it. Say, God, it feels so good. Oh my God, I love it. Exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. Like, feed your subconscious that. And then every 2 hours, envision your goal. Maybe it's for 1 minute. Maybe you can only do it for 1 minute. And then eventually you can do it for 2, and then 5, and then 10 minutes. So you're building your will, and you're building your concentration. You do that throughout the day and create, I'm not saying go live in your imagination all day long. You got to go do the work, get out there and do it. But the more you do that, the more you're going to inundate your subconscious with what you want. And you're going to be deliberately practicing this new version of you and this new goal that you truly want. I think that's a great place to start doing those two things.
I like that. And that was actually one of the first times I'd heard to set the reminder for every 2 hours to then really visualize it. I think that's excellent, because I think a lot of people will have vision boards, and then some people will struggle and say, well, why isn't this happening? Well, you just put a bunch of crazy pictures on a wall, but you're not feeling it, and you're not imagining it, and you're not doing it repetitively. I think repetition's key.
Yeah, it's I got it right here, actually. I'll read it to you. So you've seen this book, Power of Awareness, I'm sure, right? Bob loved this book. I'm not sure where it's at in here. He loved this book, and there's somewhere in here. There it is. He had me. I must have read this every day for 6 months with a couple of people on my team. I read it with Bob too. But the key, you just nailed it. Like, people will do this stuff. They'll watch The Secret, and The Secret was so great because it did raise everybody's conscious awareness about like the law of attraction, which is kind of a catchphrase these days or whatever, which it's a secondary law to the law of vibration, which means nothing rests, like everything's moving. So I think people watched that and they were like, well, I can just make a vision board and sit there and a Ferrari will show up in my garage. And which is cute. I wish that could happen for all of us. And maybe it can, anything's possible. Yeah. But they didn't realize you have to get on with the work first and foremost, but then you have to feel yourself in the end of it. Like, you have to live in the wish fulfilled. And if you're not living in the end, you're living somewhere else, and your subconscious doesn't know right from wrong. So give it exactly what you want, like plant that spiritual seed and continue to water it. Don't dig it up. But Goddard talks about it in here. If you don't mind me reading, it's real short. Yeah. And notice how many times I say the word from. Like he's saying, thinking from, not thinking right now, thinking from. Like that's where you're living in the end.
Yeah.
He says the future must become the present in the imagination of the one who would wisely and consciously create circumstances. We must translate vision into being, thinking of into thinking from. Imagination must center itself in some state and view that world from that state. Thinking from the end is an intense perception of the world of fulfilled desire. Thinking from the state desired is creative living. Ignorance of this ability to think from the end is bondage. It is the root of all bondage with which man is bound. They only use the word man in here because it's like 100 years ago, but I'll say man to catch them up. To passively surrender to the evidence of the senses, which we just talked about, underestimates the capacities of the inner self, subjective world. Once man or woman accepts thinking from the end as a creative principle in which he can cooperate or she can cooperate, then he or she is redeemed from the absurdity of ever attempting to achieve his or her objective by merely thinking of it. Like that's subjective control. Like that is what it's all about, you know, and you nailed it. I love that you brought that up because you have to think from the end and be in the emotion of it, feeling it.
Yeah. Which is the vibration.
Yeah.
I love when I was listening to Bob's book, The Paradigm, the Master Your Paradigm, Master Your Life. I might be butchering that title, but it was a great book. I was listening to it on audio. And when he said the part, like when we released The Secret, we helped a lot of people, but we also caused mass confusion. And I think it was the whole thing of people are like, oh, I just need to like put these pictures up and think, you know, but there was so much more to it.
Yeah, I mean, I was mentoring under him when The Secret came out, which was a blessing and a curse because it was wild. It was crazy wherever we went. And he used to always say that. He said everybody and their mom was writing books on law of attraction. He goes, but no one actually understood it. And he said no one understood the law of attraction like I do. You know, he was the foremost expert in his opinion, in my opinion, and I think the world's opinion. And it did a lot of harm. It did a lot of good, but over the years, eventually, I think that chaos was turned into order. Like heaven's first law is order. Over the years, at least in our world, because Bob would teach what it actually really was and how to actually implement it into your lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So before we wrap up, I want to talk about one more topic, which we've talked about as well, which is the importance of letting go. I think this is important because it applies to everything. Could be a job, a situation, a relationship, everything. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier with someone else on our team, Melissa. She's fantastic, and she was talking about chasing something a couple months ago, and I just said, like, you know, what would Bob tell you right now? You know, and she's like, well, what do you think? And I said, I think he would tell you to let it go. You're so focused on something needing to come from right here, you know, and the fact that you're so focused on it coming from right here, you have choked the outlet to everywhere else it could possibly come from. I said, you have to start focusing on it coming from expected and unexpected places. Otherwise, it's only going to come from this place, and it probably won't come from this place because you're forcing it, and force negates everything. You can't chase things. Like you chase it, it's going to continue to run away. You attract it, you know. And I think the next day she started to attract all these great things because she wrote out something that said, let it happen. And that doesn't mean we don't take action and do the work, but I think as you allow certain things, like a lot of people would come to Bob and they would say, you know, I want to attract a spouse or a significant other, and he would, a lot of times they would say, I really want it to be this person, you know. And he was like, you can't do that, you know, like maybe it will be that person. He goes, but you need to write out a list of all the attributes that you want of that person, right? And you probably heard Bob talk about this. And he said, but no face to it, just the energy of that person and their ambition and their style and the color of their hair maybe. And he goes, then you go live with that person. You know, like you go to dinner with that person, you sleep at night with that person, you wake up and have breakfast with that person. You really live, like we just talked about, living in the end and the emotion of that. And I think anytime in life when we start to chase and we don't let something happen, we're in deep trouble. We're in deep doo-doo. And I love the letting part of it, because that doesn't mean you don't do the work and you don't take action. And sometimes you got to will yourself and just work super hard some weeks. And then other weeks, you're in flow and it happens like in an effortless way. And you probably have seen that over the last couple months with me, like with some of the results I have, right? And you're like people, and I'm not saying that to brag on me. I'm just saying, like, you see it and like I'm on vacation and things are happening, right? Like it's just I'm attracting it, and people are like, "How are you attracting that?" And I had a great mentor that was here prior, doing other things now, that I watched him, and a girl that was on our sales team, we would always call each other and we're like, "How the hell does he do this?" And she would always say, "He's just on that frequency, and we have to figure out how to be on that frequency without forcing it, without saying, oh, I got to do it now, or putting pressure on myself." And because I don't put pressure on myself, I put a standard on myself. I put, core values and a philosophy that I live my life by, and creating an effortless success is one of them, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And letting go is such a key thing, because I've said this to my friends, and I recently made a video I'm going to release, but it was about, especially with relationships, because I for some reason I've become the relationship expert to my friends, and I'm like, I don't know why this is a thing, but apparently it is. And I always tell them, like, whether they're in relationships and they're not sure it's the one, or they're wondering why somebody's not writing them back. And I always tell them, I'm like, you have to let it go, because you cannot control another person. You can only control your reaction to it. And I said, and the longer you obsess over these thoughts or questioning yourself or whatever, it's like you're clogging up the pipe. So you can't allow what's supposed to flow to you to come in, because there's noise in the environment. And how can the right thing come through you? So, and it can go with business too. I was talking to one of my business partners, and he said, I sent this email and I'm not getting the response, and we really need to attach this person to this project. And I said, have you done everything you can? He said, yes. And I said, well, then you have to let it go. You literally just have to let it go. So I think it's like the letting go is key. Like, once you've done everything you can, you can't control anything beyond that. Except
I agree with you. We deal with this every day, where you're talking to somebody about doing mentorship or becoming a coach or whatever it is with us, and they really want it, right? They want it, and they'll say, "Well, I need X, Y, and Z to get the money or whatever," and that's fine, But they'll say, "Yeah, I got money coming from this place," and I'll say, "Stop." Then I teach them that. I say, maybe it'll come from there." I said, "But I want you to stay completely open. I want you to make the decision." Right. And I want you to only focus on what you want and the end result of it. And I want you to be open to wherever the money comes from. Because if you start saying it's going to come from an inheritance, and then all of a sudden that doesn't come, then you just stopped it from coming from anywhere else. And you're right. It's the same thing with relationships, for sure. Do you think that goes back to people needing validation? Like, like someone doesn't respond back to them, maybe it hurts their self-image, and then they keep chasing them, and then they wonder why they keep getting what they're getting.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to people want what they can't have.
Yeah.
You can't beat it. It's just the way a lot of people are wired, right? So you kind of create that, like, there's not enough, or this is elite, or something like that. There's only limited space. So you create that excitement because people want that. So maybe it comes from that. But I like what you said about, I didn't even think about that. Honestly, it's like a lot of people do say, when I get my bonus, when I get an inheritance, or when I, can sell these stock options, whatever it may be. But I loved, that was so eye-opening. It's like, be open to where it can come from. Because if it doesn't happen, because I had a situation years ago, I'd gotten involved in, well, it wasn't too long ago. It was like pandemic and after pandemic. I'd gotten involved with a big crypto company, and I was doing a lot of crypto trading, and I was doing like some businesses on the side, and I was just diving deep. Like, I was nerd girling out like you wouldn't believe. There was times I was trading stuff at the bars, and luckily, like, I got out pretty unscathed. But I remember this other business at the time, if everything had kind of aligned, like, I would have been making stupid money doing nothing. Literally, these things were just cranking dollars left and right. Well, that came to a very like abrupt halt. It was still going, but everything started to drastically slow down, and then the price of the crypto just tanked along with everything else. And I remember I didn't feel like distraught or like it wasn't the end of the world, but it kind of did, because I was expecting this massive extra income to come from that place. And after that kind of happened, it was like there wasn't a lot of income coming from a lot of places. And then I finally like kind of got out of that mindset, and it started to open up again. But that's so genius, because I didn't even think about that. I was so tied to that one crypto business thing I was doing.
So funny. That's the law of attraction. They're like, the law of attraction is the law of resonance. So whatever we're in resonance with is what we're going to attract. And if we limit that to like, why would you limit anything in an abundant universe? You know, like we live in an abundant, you know, like why would we ever do that? Like we all do it. I do it too. Like it's just, and then you're just like, what am I doing? Like we live in an abundant universe. Like if I really believe in what we teach, then I need to think that way. So that's an interesting story, but it's a great point.
Yeah, because I honestly, I didn't even think about it from that viewpoint that I just explained to you until you said that. So that was like eye-opening. I just didn't realize what was going on. Everything seemed to be kind of crashing around and everybody was being impacted. So I just didn't even think about it that way. But okay, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. You guys, I think this episode you should definitely replay. There was so much good stuff in here. It was amazing. But luckily, DP also has some great stuff that he puts out online and some great lessons. So let us know where we can find you. Plug your socials, anything else.
Sure. If you go to dpgates.com, it'll redirect you to a private Facebook group I have. And I'm on Instagram and YouTube. It's just DP Gates, pretty simple. And I work with Madison, work closely with her. And, you know, she's a fellow entrepreneur as well. And, you know, we get to work within Bob's platform and, you know, help a lot of people there. So, you know, if you're looking for mentorship or become a coach or anything like that, you know, we certainly can help you with that too. But I want to thank you for being here and, you know, doing this, and you're doing great things with us. And, you know, Madison hasn't been with us very long, but she's stepping into the role, and she's doing phenomenally well for somebody who's so new, because it's quite the environment when you get into what we're doing. You know, there's certain standards of excellence, certain ways of thinking, certain things to deal with, and she's just knocking it out of the park, everything that's thrown at her.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, and I just recently released that I was able to join the Proctor Gallagher team after writing my book and being in a higher vibration. I started attracting amazing opportunities. So instead of just studying these people that changed my life and working with, I get to actually work with them. And I'm telling you, everything from the podcast numbers are way up. There's more advertisers that are being attracted. I work with the most positive, high vibration people ever. When you get on that right frequency, everything changes. And I always tell people, the most dangerous place I think you can be is to have one title. If you're at a party and somebody says, "What do you do?" and the only thing that can come out of your mouth is, "I'm an accountant," I think it's dangerous. I think you're tied to that one outcome, where I believe, and DP believes as well, that you can have multiple titles and you can do anything you want, because we live in an abundant world, which is why I have so many things that I'm working on, but I feel like I could take on so much more too. So I'm so honored to be able to work with. I'm like, is this for real? Like sometimes I'm like, I'm so lucky. This is amazing. So it is great. So yes, you guys definitely, if you're looking for mentors or coaches, reach out to Proctor Gallagher. It's amazing. And what else? Anything else that you want to? So that's where they can find you. dpgates.com, social media.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. So you guys check him out. He's got a lot of great clips that drops a lot of great advice, and definitely go back and listen to this episode. It was well worth it. And I so appreciate you. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone else that is listening, wherever you may be. We will see you next time to find out who's next.
Hey, your host here, Madison Malloy. Please make sure to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms, and please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. Also, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at contact@nexttomadison.com. I thank you again for listening. Bye.